Hey, folks. Hello.
What's hot? We're on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Better now. Welcome to Revenue Search, one of the most influential podcasts, live streams in all of Bittensor. I'm Mark Reeser, my co-host, as usual, laughing because we have the same intro every time.
Something like that's getting pretty boring now. But
It'll get better. In next year, you'll visit
and what?
We also need to change our intro there, but I still enjoy it.
True.
But we haven't had a Revenue Search for what feels like ages.
I know it's been that long. I've been growing a beard. Since we last had a revenue search, but
Very impressive.
we've been very busy. Lots to announce in the future. But for now, I've been very, very excited about this revenue search, and it's probably a very good one to open up on after our little hiatus, because we have Crucible Labs. So this isn't a typical revenue search where we're looking into a subnet. This is Crucible Labs, and we have one of the co-founders of Bittensor, which is Shib or Allah, and also David Lowy, his business partner. So I think without further ado, you love it when I say that, every time. Let's bring them in. Right. There we go. Oh, this is the wrong way around. There we go. You guys need to be on top there. How's it going, guys?
Great.
Hey guys.
Synchronized helloing. Love it. Again, thank you so much. The honor is definitely ours. It's very much appreciated. And Allah loved Revenue Search so much that he left.
He's disappeared. Where's he gone?
I'm out of here.
Yeah. Anyway, whilst we're waiting for Allah, David, who are you first? Because like what I've seen is that Crucible Labs works very much behind the scenes, but you do a lot behind the scenes, and like new people into Bittensor probably won't be familiar with what you guys do. So yeah, who are you, David and Allah, and then also what does Crucible do?
Allah, take it off. Sounds good. Yeah, I can probably get started. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Shib, Allah. I've been working with Jacob on the Bittensor ecosystem since about 2019-ish. Basically, can call me early contributor as well, part of the founding team. We went through blood, sweat, and tears together to get to this point. Towards 2024, effectively decided it's time to basically start to decentralize the Open Bittensor Foundation, and decided to sort of start tackling some problems that are really a little difficult to tackle for the foundation by itself, or really just doesn't have the bandwidth to do. Things like building some tooling, things like building some sort of getting into the nitty and the gritty of some of the subnets, incubating, accelerating, and pushing in that direction. And so that was when I decided to partner up with David and to kind of see if we can tackle this problem together. And this is when Crucible Labs started.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say our role in the ecosystem has evolved as we've gotten to know it better, in a sense. Like it evolves, we evolve. So when we started, the most important thing was we had $1 billion of emissions going across a number of subnets to have kind of that allocation done as intelligently as possible. And so we became a validator. So that's how we started, because validators, this was pre the change to DTAO, and so the validators were allocating. And then we were like, oh, we need to have really full-time, committed analysts to help explain the ecosystem to people and to better allocate and better make, so that we could also make better decisions. And that's when we hired Sam Mikasa. And then Seth joined, and then they spun out Unsupervised Capital, and we backed that because we thought, okay, bringing people like yourselves, like Sammy and Seth, into the ecosystem, people who are articulate and able to explain it to other people, is going to be much higher leverage than anything Allah and I could do. Then we were like, oh, this wallet is going to be kind of an important access point for a lot of people. How can, we make this investing in subnets easier? And so we started building the wallet. Then we were like, oh, there's lots of, we want to up the quality of the subnets. We think there are some really good ones, but we'd like there to be dozens of good ones. And so started incubating subnets. So it's really evolved as, kind of what's the highest leverage thing we can do right now to kind of make the ecosystem better.
Nice. How many subnets have you incubated then?
We've helped a lot of people along. Like, I think the first subnet that we started working with was Bitmind.
Bitmind.
That was more of an accelerator role. But I'd say we've worked, kind of because we have, some of the earliest developers from Bittensor on our team, we're uniquely situated to help people understand the nuances of getting a permissionless system working well.
Ah, nice. And so I guess, well, Ali, you just had, if you've permanently left OTF then?
Pretty much, yes. Since about 2024, I think I released a Medium article about it, kind of talking about the next steps. Still in connection with Jake, we still talk on the regular, but I'm not so involved in the kernel development anymore. I'm more sort of on the Crucible side of things and sort of, speaking to subnets almost on the daily and kind of getting more involved in that.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess you're really like the commercial market arm of
Product side of things.
or
Yeah.
yeah. So was your end vision of BitTensor ever different to Jacob's end vision, or like were you both pointing towards the same place, or what?
That's a very, very good question. So to kind of maybe dial it back a little bit in time, I think Jacob's been working on the idea of just general decentralized AI since like 2016-ish, give or take. It's been a long time for him. I kind of around 2019, I arrived at a similar conclusion, and we sort of met up online. And he was like, "Hey, I've been working on this for a while. Come work with me, yada yada." Started building it together. The initial idea was just decentralized AI, right? We weren't kind of thinking that it would become this massive coordination engine to incentivize anything. It was just, hey, let's see if we can, build some models that can learn from each other and grow that way and compound knowledge. And interestingly, we sort of, down the line, eventually we created the Revolutions branch, which became the subnets, which is sort of what unlocked all of this and allows you to really start thinking outside the box instead of just thinking of this as an AI incentive layer. It's an anything incentive layer, right? And we still kind of kept thinking more along the lines of, okay, how do we create an ecosystem where people can build products easily, but at the same time also achieve the goal of decentralization in the first place. And towards sort of 2024, we decided that it is time to, what's the word to say, to decentralize the OTF itself, which was a plan since day one. I think a lot of the early listeners, the early adopters of Bittensor who are listening to the podcast probably remember us talking about this for a long time. They're ready to decentralize OTF, ready to decentralize OTF. And I remember I get a lot of DMs on Discord. Are you guys splitting up? It's like, no. It's about centralizing. It's not about leaving. So, because in a lot of ways, sort of, if you stay in one spot, you're sort of centralizing the team itself, and you're also centralizing the effort. So you're not really kind of tackling the problem from different directions. And that's sort of where the logic came in. So effectively in 2024, we kind of had a very long conversation about what the future should look like. And we ended up sort of at the same conclusion that really decentralization is sort of key here. And, I really wanted to tackle the subnet side of things and kind of the social and economy side of things of Bittensor. And sort of Jacob, as we all know, is almost like always 2-3 steps ahead of everybody working on the kernel side of things. So he kind of continued running the OTF since then. And sort of at this point, it's sort of at a point where I'm able to talk to the product side and he's sort of still on the kernel. And that's where we are.
Amazing. And so how long until do you think Bittensor will be like command center decentralized? Because there's been a bit of sort of backlash with the whole net TAO inflow change, because that happened like boom, and like some of my our institutional investors went, wait a minute, that was pretty fast. Like what led up to that implementation?
I think one of the things to think about just before you kind of get into the details of this implementation is what's the right balance right now between centralized and decentralized. Because I think you can get into decentralized very quickly. That's actually a relatively trivial change in a way, but then the way you make decisions still needs to be coordinated. And this is where a lot of, chains fall down that kind of move too fast in that direction. And when you need a lot of changes, which is right now, like after DTAO, pretty much was exactly as I hoped it would be. Like, and I think pretty predictable. But then there's a lot of little unintended consequences, and you need to react to those quickly. So if we had been kind of going through some period of let's kind of get a voting system and whatever, just to decide on little things, that wouldn't actually be so great. So while it's disruptive, I'm actually in favor of moving quickly right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that lasts, but probably a year, where we can just make these tweaks that are kind of, I think, going to be really important. What we're trying to do is very difficult, like create an incentive mechanism that works in a permissionless way. That's a really difficult thing. So, you have to kind of respect that.
Yeah.
Just to, so I was going to add to what David was saying. I fully agree. I think speed is extremely important here because everyone's noticed sort of how fast people adapt to different changes. But one thing that kind of everyone seems to forget as well is, we built Bittensor based on speed, right? The whole point of adopting, the Polkadot ecosystem was that we can create forkless runtime upgrades very quickly. And the big reason we didn't become a parachain on Polkadot is because things were moving way too slowly. So if you end up with sort of bleeding emissions, or you end up with a problem where people are taking advantage of this ecosystem and you have to take 6 months to vote on something, that's just not going to work, right? You're going to move way too slowly, and everything's going to catch up way too quickly to you, and it's just, you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. Especially with the halving coming up, I think you do need to have big changes done before then, because the halving sort of cements things a little bit.
Mhm.
And I like the analogy I always have in my head is that when you look at governance, the best form of governance over the last sort of 250,000 years of human existence is benevolent dictator. And it's a bit like a parent and a child. When you have a kid, you as the parent is the benevolent dictator. What you say happens. But when the kid is like 8, 10 years old, they start to sort of become their own person a bit. And then by the time they're 16, they're like pretty much mini adults. So you then have to give a lot of like responsibility to the kid. And then your role as benevolent dictator becomes to the sort of like benevolent observer to a degree.
You're right. You're right. And I think then you have to look at the, what's motivating the people who are the dictator right now. And I can tell you, no one wants to get out of the dictator role more than Const. It's exhausting. It's a really, really, really hard job where you're taking in like real frustrations from so many people, right? Like, because it's their lives. They're building their lives on Bittensor. And so it will be a lot better for everyone when this is done. And he's really asking companies like Crucible to step up. So, if it could happen right now, it would.
So, okay, 2 quick questions. So if Bittensor is that child, how old is that child in that analogy? And you said step up. Step up in what way?
Make propositions to the group in terms of what changes you would like to make. Implement them or help implement them. So yeah, and I think that's been going kind of from the beginning with this, like it's, many of the people who kind of were once in the foundation who are now, kind of running companies in the Bittensor ecosystem.
And as for the child's age, I'd say just learn to walk barely, not even close.
Oh,
So,
wow.
very early, very, very early.
Nice. Mark, you've been rather quiet down there.
Always listening. Always listening. So guys, our number one goal for me and Siam is to bring more capital in, and everything kind of flows on the back of that for us. Every decision, wherever we're investing our time and energy, what's the number one goal for you guys, and where does that see you investing most of your time and energy?
I mean, the number one goal right now is to help people understand the ecosystem, that set of investors, retail investors mostly, so that they can have more confidence to invest. So I'd say we're, kind of like more trying to be your, marketing arm in terms of building materials. Like that's really what we're trying to do with Sammy and Seth and at Unsupervised Capital. That's what we're trying to do with the wallet that we're building. Everything is built towards onboarding investors.
And I think in doing that, we sort of discovered there's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Open truths, unsaid secrets about the Bittensor ecosystem. Really, it's things we all know, things like fragmentation. Standards are still emerging in the ecosystem. So everyone's sort of, in a way, reinventing the wheel when it comes to wallets, infra tooling, pipelines, etc. Another thing is, and that's something we talk about almost every day, is onboarding complexity. How hard it is to actually bring developers in to get them started. It's a little too hard for them to get started, and it's also too opaque for capital allocators to evaluate the subnets themselves. And that's sort of why we built the allocator in the wallet itself.
Mhm.
And then finally, it's some subnets are still struggling to, I want to say, articulate their value capture in the first place. And that's, I think, a very common problem that everyone has. And that's also because, we're still early in the market, still discovering which primitives are actually durable and which ones aren't. But, we're getting there. And it's sort of part of the things that we're sort of observing and sort of talking to people is that these two problems are still not working, but they're problems that hopefully we'll be able to fix, in the near future.
And do you and David have similar thoughts on alphanomics, like what you like and what you don't like?
What is that? Alphanomics?
Yeah. How a subnet drives value to their token. So
Well, I think we both start from the exact same spot, which is, does this subnet have utility? Like, we're not really crypto people. That's why I don't even know that term. Like, we're much more AI people and interested in, if decentralized money is important, then decentralized AI is a lot more important. And that's our starting point for being involved at all. And then we're like, well, what are the subnets doing? And if we think they're interesting, like if you take Ridges, for example, which is, harnessing the tokenomics to finance open source development, that's a really interesting use case. And for a coding agent, which is a very, kind of useful AI application, like kind of really the most useful right now in terms of revenues and stuff. So that's a really good idea. So we're like, okay, people should know about that. And, that's, kind of, and we put our own money in that. Like, we think that's good. And so, and then we should tell people why. So that's the starting point that I think Al and I come to it. And when you look at Ridges, the first thing you realize relative to a lot of other subnets is miners can make a lot of money, right? Because they're introducing know-how, not just hardware. And so you can get paid for your know-how. And so they could be running at, 95% margins because the costs of their infrastructure is de minimis relative to their know-how. And that's attractive to us because open source developers, this is one of the things that Al and I have been really excited about from the beginning, is that open source developers could use a financing mechanism, which Bittensor subnets are. And the idea that everybody who works on it is basically becoming an owner is very attractive to me.
Incentivize open source.
Yeah. And how, so Ala, how do you think the alphanomics will sort of evolve? Because we've gone from a very primitive buy back and burn to all sorts of fancy stuff like the hippiest new alphanomics. Do you see any further evolving? Like, what are your thoughts on it all?
100% is going to evolve for sure. I think that's part of being early, right? You get a lot of subnets that are becoming more and more creative in how they do their. I always call them tokenomics. I'm very surprised they're called alphanomics now. Yeah, in however they do their alphanomics, it's going to change over time. That's just how it is, right? People are going to discover new ways of incentivizing, and that's sort of the beauty of Bittensor, right? You're sort of able to ingest any technology and sort of any really any incentive mechanism you want to create, right? I think over time, there's probably, I foresee OTF opening it up further to help people do their alphonomics as well, to kind of allow them to come up with more and more creative ways to do it. Things like allowing sort of the split takes differences, things like allowing sort of, for example, you have a subnet where miners are more valuable than validators. So why shouldn't they earn more than validators do, right? That sort of thing, that's 100%. I'm telling you, as we speak, probably Constant's thinking about this. So these sort of things are being built, right? And I think that these are going to evolve it further and further and further down the line. But the problem remains the same, which is how do you implement this in as safe a fashion as possible so that people aren't able to sort of take advantage of the ecosystem. But 100%, I'm telling you right now, Bittensor is not going to look the same in a year, for sure.
Amazing. And so I won't name names, but Mark and I have had some pretty interesting Zooms over the last couple of months. And a lot of them, or some of them, were with very influential, very deep-pocketed people, not within crypto or AI or Bittensor, but traditional markets. And one of the questions which I've asked some of these who have a little toe in Bittensor is, you've got X tens of millions in Bittensor already, which is like back of a sofa loose change for you. What's stopping you from putting, like $1 billion or 10 billion into Bittensor? And the answer's always been the same. It's we've lost Mark now. The answer has been Bittensor is still too young. It changes far too often, so I can't make a proper business case and decision to then move proper capital into it. So, have you experienced the same sort of conversations your end?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is actually reasonable. Different investors have different risk appetite, and if people are participating and watching, that's fantastic. So actually, it doesn't bother me at all. Like, I think what I told some investors, prior to the detail launch was detail has a lot of risk. And, kind of if it works out as expected, then, it on balance is probably better to get in before than after. And, that is true about every change that, we're anticipating. You guys spend a lot of time talking to new subnet owners. So you have a lot more information than they do about what's coming. So I'm really excited about some of the new subnets, kind of for people, just in the kind of pre-launching stage. And so I have more information. But what I'm hoping is that in 6 months, that information is going to prove out. And so then on balance, it's probably better to invest now than later. That's kind of what I try and tell people if you think these things are going to happen. But most people are spending, because they have to, if they have 90% of their assets in other assets, then they're spending 90% of their time thinking about other things. And so that kind of is logical to me.
And sorry, just one last question, which I forgot to ask right at the beginning. So, David, you've got an extensive Google background, is that correct?
Yeah, I spent
yeah.
Yeah, I spent 19 years at Google. And then in last year, 10 years, I ran a growth fund for them.
Holy shit. Okay. So you're the perfect partner for Allah.
Well, I think I've been interested in decentralization, since the 90s. And, kind of as a consequence, was very early into crypto and Bitcoin, obviously, specifically. And the ethos of this really worked for me. And so, yes, I was very predisposed to spending time on this and that area.
And me bugging him 24/7 also helped, just to add to that.
And so what is the revenue stream for Crucible then? Is it like a percentage of owner key emissions from things you incubate or what?
We're currently doing, each project, we just try and think about what's the best way to finance that for its long-term success. So that's the way we start. So when we did the validator, we take a take like any validator. So that's relatively straightforward. We continue to do that. And we hope the validator role is going to become even more important over time. And we're constantly in conversations, kind of to try and come up with schemes with subnet owners where we can do more, because we think we can be a really good partner to them. With unsupervised capital, like, okay, we want to have all this research. We want to have our money, some, kind of portion of our money professionally managed. We want to have high quality conversations with a team that's doing research. Like basically the people that would have worked for me at Capital G were very stimulating conversations for me. I want to have those types of conversations about Bittensor. And, they provide great lead gen for me in terms of like understanding, finding the smart people faster. And so that the best way to finance that was to back them in starting their own fund. So we were seed investors in their fund and we're part owners in their fund. And that's our revenue model. For the wallet, the hope is that is just kind of help support the validator in terms of kind of our business model. But ultimately, it's always good to kind of, have competition in terms of user interfaces, because different users need different things. Like some people want to see all the detailed TAO stats and some people don't. So I think it's good that there's kind of many approaches there. And then, with the subnets, we always think about a subnet as a business. Like fundamentally, like it's not just like something you can do like five subnets. Not my view. A subnet is a really hard business to build. And so we become kind of like a Y Combinator like stake in subnets.
So you don't fancy getting back in the subnet owner seat again, Ala? Well, not again, but
How about this? I'd say stay tuned. Best way we could describe it. We're not sort of not sure if we can get into that quite yet, David, but it's more that we are getting more active in the subnet scene. And there's gonna be some changes fairly soon.
that's exciting. Will you come back in a share once you've gone live?
Absolutely.
Well, it won't be for us to share because there'll be an entrepreneur in the seat. And that's really, that's really our approach there. We're just trying to start as many businesses on Bittensor as we can.
Nice. What's the one thing that's going to make the difference? You talked about kind of bringing retail investors in. Is the most important thing the wallet? Is the most important thing controllable, influenceable, or is it just going to happen when it happens and nobody can control it?
Maybe give me a little bit more context for what you're thinking.
Well, so attracting retail investors into Bittensor. Is the wallet the most important thing? Is the wallet and some user manual, or is it the price of TAO, i.e. something that's relatively uncontrollable, that's going to be the most important thing, or is it going to be a breakout subnet, or are there other things on your list of, hey, if we can just crack this?
Yeah, I think it's the subnet. Like I think there's no doubt right now that a subnet going mainstream, meaning attracting a lot of interest, as a use case. Like, oh, if Ridge's coding agent gets used by lots of people, that's really the best proof that businesses can be built on Bittensor. And then people will be like, oh, what's this Bittensor about? And is it fairly valued? And I think you come to the conclusion that if you can have some number of businesses that could be as big as Cursor, then maybe not even that big, kind of maybe much bigger. Then, Bittensor is a good bet. And, it's a good bet in the context of, yes, I think Bittensor could be more valuable than Solana. That's kind of what we're shooting for. And is it possible that an AI incubator could be more valuable than Solana? Of course it is. So I think that's kind of the path that we hope people go down, sophisticated investors go down, is that they see something that's really attractive, then they spend the time to get curious about Bittensor. They see that there are other emerging things and they're like, okay, I want to invest in that subnet and I want to invest in Bittensor.
Just to add a little bit to what David was saying as well here. Have you guys been to Token 2049 this year, last year, the year before?
Yeah, Dubai.
To buy this
Okay.
way.
Okay, so I went to the one in Singapore a couple of years ago, and then I went to Super AI right after that. Did you see anything crypto related that was touching the real world at all, or was it all just customers for crypto? Exactly, right. And I think that Tensor is sort of positioned to be the first project to actually bridge that gap, which currently exists in the entire ecosystem, right? And I think that to David's point, if somebody's able to build a product that is able to um, reach the masses while using BitTensor as a platform, it doesn't need to be, you know, the be all end all, right? If their entire revenue is just from subnets, that's fine. But if they create sort of a dual revenue stream where they have a real product working on BitTensor and they have sort of Web 2 revenue, so to speak, I think that's the holy grail here, to sort of what's what I'm looking for. To retail investors, I think that's gonna be what's most interesting. I think sort of in a more ideal world, eventually it sort of becomes a little bit like building a MongoDB. I'm not gonna advertise I'm building a MongoDB. I'm just using it as a backend that runs my system, right? And I can imagine someone that's doing that, right? They're just running on BitTensor and they're working fine. Everything's building great. It's just decentralized in the backend. Retail investors might not need to care about that as long as the product is appealing.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? You spend all your time on this.
Go for it, Mark. I have my opinion. I think you similar.
Yeah, it's a breakout subnet is what's going to give BitTensor real traction without question. Education, coming into the space is important. Understanding like what it is and how it works and what subnets are and what that need answers, and there is no
No, not you. Does Mark sound like R2D2 right now?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'll let him.
Have I R2D2'd?
You
A little bit.
try now. Try again.
Try again now.
Yeah, we just.
Oh, I think you said design.
Is Davina like downloading something on another computer or something?
I don't think so.
Are you running a subnet right now? Because that potentially be it.
No, very badly. Well, Siam, you take over if I'm all gobbledygook.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of chicken and egg. And again, this is just my own perspective. Like, I think that the subnet that breaks out into mainstream and gets millions of users is definitely going to bring eyeballs. And then when those eyeballs look at the subnet, they'll be like, how do I buy it? And it'll just force people to learn about BitTensor because it's so freaking complicated to a newbie. I remember when the detailed white paper came out in Valentine's Day or just before, and I read that thinking I have an IQ of 10 because I didn't understand a word of it. I then spent the next 3 months using ChatGPT to try and understand paragraph by paragraph by paragraph. And the average punter won't bother. So there is a chicken and egg thing there because I actually think the real tsunami of BitTensor needs a tsunami of proper capital. And that's only going to come from institutions, not retail. I think any retail that's going to be in BitTensor is pretty much already here. Yes, we could sort of steal people from Solana and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the other things, but I don't think it will move the needle. We need basically a bucket load of fresh capital and fresh eyeballs. And I think if big institutional money were to pour in, it would then also help the other stuff. Like when we saw all of these bridges being made into like Solana and Base and stuff, I had a controversial take at the time. I said, it's great, we do need it, but no one will walk over those bridges. And we've sort of seen that. The bridge is already there. They're operational, but there's minimal volume crossing between ecosystems. And that's because there's no like buzz from other people. Like there's no crypto buzz and unfortunately we need TAO to go from $300 odd to $3.5K. Then all of those bridges will be like inwards only.
Yeah, you're right I totally agree with you. This complexity issue, and the challenge, how much time it takes to understand how BitTensor works is a huge negative. And then you kind of think about it from the other side, building an incentive mechanism that can work in a permissionless way and allocate capital between the best businesses and decentralized AI is a really complicated thing to do. And so you're like, oh, is it more complicated than it needs to be? I'm not sure, but it is really complicated, and it changes because it's new or growing, and yeah. So that's a negative. So we need people who are really smart. We need really smart people who can kind of digest this quickly, and I find that is kind of generally the people that kind of it resonates best with.
And one of the things that we found is that when we're trying to tell people, we don't even bother talking about Bittensor anymore because of that. Like what emissions and all that sort of stuff. So the thing that I bring out on every TAO pilling session is this little picture here. And I know I've had some criticism saying that the descriptions are not that accurate, or please, I'm open for constructive feedback here. If anyone sees any gross errors here, let me know and I'll just change it. But the beauty of Bittensor, I think, is that really it's 9 months old. I know we've been here for 3-4 years, but DTAO was really the birth of Bittensor and subnets. And in just 9 months, we've got over a dozen subnets, which are the world's best, cheapest, or whatever, which I think is incredible. And it goes back to what David said or Allah, that there's not much in crypto land that actually does anything.
Yeah, and I don't even think you need to believe like this level of kind of you're describing something top 1% of top 1%, like a world's best. You don't even need to believe this. The valuations of these subnets is, kind of like, I don't know how you think about valuation, and that's a really good thing for us to discuss. But I think of it as, much closer to the current market cap than the fully diluted value, because I think it's going to be years of development before. So I think like, oh, and what's it going to be worth in the next year or something like that. So many of these subnets are worth like, $10 million, $50 million. That's a good bet. So you're like, oh, should become kind of one of the larger mediating forces between demand and supply, kind of hardware. Yeah, they're going pretty well now, and they have a pretty good shot. That's how I think of it. You don't even need to say the world's best. And it's like, is that worth like 100 million? Yeah, of course that's worth an answer to us. So, it depends how you come at it. The valuation of Bittensor, overall 3.5 billion or something like that today, I don't know. Yeah, it's a few percentage points, Solana. Could it become Solana? Yeah, I think it has. And is it kind of better than a 2% chance? Well, maybe like a 2 to 10% chance. So it's actually, to me, all you have to do is believe these things are fairly valued and you like what they're doing. You don't even need to be hyperbolic.
And I think I'm going to tackle this from the other end of things, more historical. And I talked David Zieroff about this so many times at this point. He's so tired of hearing it. So feel free to mute me if you want, David. Basically, when the Revolutions branch first came out and the first subnets eked out, the amount of garbage that came out of that was just staggering. Like, I was just sitting there going like, what the hell is, I'm not even gonna name names here, but what the hell are these people doing? You know what I mean? The interesting thing though is towards the beginning of DTAO, right? Towards that, when that paper first came out, if you took a snapshot of Bittensor when Revolutions first came out, like within the first week versus that last week, right? It's kind of like a few seconds after the Big Bang versus a few million years after the Big Bang. It's just a completely different shift, right? The quality gone up, the team quality has gone up, the amount of serious people on the ecosystem has gone up, and it's sort of like we ended up with a much more interesting ecosystem at that point, right? And then DTAO hit, and we ended up with a similar reset, right? Had a lot of subnets kind of calling me like, "Hey, we don't know how to do this. What's going on?" Obviously a lot of miners left. A lot of people kind of decided this is like too complicated for us, yada yada. We ended up with a similar drop where the quality went down and sort of people didn't really know what was happening. And then it has climbed since then. Bittensor earlier this year is not comparable to Bittensor today, right? Because the quality has just changed so much. We still have a parity distribution of quality subnets, but it's still extremely obvious how much it has evolved since then. And I think that your paper has been kind of describing what I've been saying for a long time, but effectively it's the same thing. Maybe not necessarily to David's point being the best, but it is still a very workable product, and it's still something that you can build on top of and sort of stand on shoulders of giants, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think all of the things that you say, like kind of describing, you know, I think Bitmine has like a reasonable chance, like of becoming, the world's best deepfake detection. I think deepfake detection is one of those things that would be done, if it's done in a decentralized way, would give me a lot more comfort. So I think the idea of it works for me, and the approach that the team is taking works for me. And I think it's like super early days, like, BitTensor 4 years ago, early days. But that's the bet you're making. You're not betting that this is NVIDIA today. You're betting that it could be that. And so, reasonably, you look at the team, you do what any venture investor would do.
Nice. And so, Alan, earlier you said that you don't see Bittensor as an AI platform. It's a permissionless incentive mechanism platform, or words to that effect. And I completely agree. I think we are on the cusp now of seeing non-AI businesses that already exist in the real world start to reverse into Bittensor because they're like, "Oh, this looks interesting," and I see, sort of instinctive negative knee-jerk reactions by some people in the community. Like, what is your take on that? Existing businesses reversing into Bittensor?
You mean non-AI businesses?
Non-AI businesses, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense intuitively if you really think about it from a business perspective and from an engineering perspective. For a lot of businesses, just to give you the simplest solution, right? For a lot of businesses, sort of decentralizing their compute and having people try it for them is much cheaper than going to AWS and paying an arm and a leg for like an EC2 instance, right? That's sort of the economic sort of cheat code in a way that people will try to use to kind of get into Bittensor. But at the same time, the businesses that are kind of moving into Bittensor today that are non-AI, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what their incentive mechanisms would look like. But if they had built it correctly, then they've not only sort of outsourced their backend, but at the same time, they've also created a backend that is a resilient generalist and not a narrow specialist, right? You have a lot of people contributing to your open source backend that is, powering your entire product. And it's continuously being audited, right? You're continuously keeping an eye on it. People are continuously contributing to it and is growing over time. Whereas, sort of with a static business, you just have a backend that runs and that's pretty much it. There's not much else you could do about it. And if you have a decent enough team, it's going to grow with that team, but it sort of caps your growth in a lot of ways. So I think sort of from a technological perspective and from a business perspective, makes a lot of sense to move into Bittensor. But having said that, not everything needs to be decentralized, right? There's some seriously critical systems that should, a lot of sort of decentralization of that system is not a really good idea. So I think it's good to take that with a sort of a teaspoon of salt with this, sort of take it as a huge positive. People are realizing the benefits, but also don't take it as a negative if somebody doesn't do it because they think their system can't take it.
I mean, I'm fine personally with any business that wants to use Bittensor as their chain. That I think is kind of my starting point. It so happens we live in a time where AI companies are kind of at the center of entrepreneurship, like obviously. And we're about a few years before kind of AI agents are using decentralized rails for payments and other things. So it kind of makes sense to me that there would be a lot of AI, decentralized AI business opportunities. And that's kind of more why I'm not like religious about how Bittensor should be used. I just think it's, given the environment, given the once in a lifetime, even better than once in a lifetime experience that we're going through right now with AI and AI agents and the future, kind of that's where the attention would be.
Nice. And recently, we've had a bit of a price tumble because U.S. government shut down. Everything's sort of been dragged down with it. But also during that, Polychain dumped a shitload of TAO. I think, like, to your knowledge, are there any other massive whales like Polychain which have basically been accumulating TAO from the early $10 sort of range and then are set for another profit taking? Like, is that the big sort of whale out of the room now, or was
I
it?
think it's kind of hard to tell, to be honest with you. We don't really follow wallets that way and kind of check who's doing what. It's kind of, honestly, it's a bit of a waste of time to kind of see who's doing what. If they want to profit take, they can profit take. In a lot of ways, sort of the best thing we did was raise through an OTC sale and not through sort of giving equity out, just because it allowed us to build how we wanted to build and not have sort of to add people to our cap table or anything like that. And that's sort of the benefit of having Open Tensor being a not-for-profit. But I think that, honestly, the Polychain stuff I've of course heard through the grapevine and through Twitter, but not aware of really anybody else as far as I know.
Mark, how's your internet?
Who knows? I've got absolutely no idea. No, I don't know what's going on. But I want to just touch briefly on the wallet. What are the big challenges with the wallet? And what are you doing to encourage retail investors to use your wallet? And in the wallet, what are you doing to encourage them to get involved in subnets?
You want me to take it on? You want to take it on, David?
Yeah,
Just start, yeah.
Okay. So the wallet really was born out of a bit of frustration that there's no real TAO-native way to really do much with TAO in the first place, especially when it comes down to DTAO. And I think David and I were getting a little flustered with sort of having to follow every single subnet and what it was doing, kind of trying to speculate on that, as opposed to we effectively became day traders doing it. And it made a lot of sense to just have something that would auto-allocate for us and not have to worry about it. And that's when the idea for the allocator kind of came into being. And then once that was sort of built out and it started running, I think we had a very quiet release back in June, July, something like that in the summer. And effectively, we decided that, we need to add a little bit more layers of security to this system, because, it's easy to just stake and forget, but stake, lock, and forget is even more valuable. And that's sort of when the work for the ledger started, and we've kind of been building it since. Ledger's been out. Well, it's working fairly well. We've had a very healthy increase of users since. And the nice thing about it is it literally, you can just lock away your time, not worry about it. And then the allocator will take care of taking the rewards you get from root and allocating that to all the rest of the subnets. Sort of, you can get exposure in that way. Whereas your principal is untouched, but your rewards are being used more efficiently than just staying in root. In terms of institutional investors, I've been speaking to a few, and sort of a lot of them will work with sort of their own validator, and they wanted to sort of lease the allocator for themselves and use it that way, as opposed to using our validator and our allocator for that. And so far, we've kind of just been ongoing conversations, but we're trying to figure out a way around allowing for institutional investors to actually jump in. The massive exchanges like Binance, Kraken, Coinbase, they're really not taking advantage of the subnets at all. They're really just staying in root, and that's it. I think that's a bit of a shame, honestly. So we think the wallet's actually positioned best to take those guys on.
Yeah, and then long term, I would think, if you just I think our view is it would be good if it was a Robinhood-like product in terms of all the information you can get, just what people are used to. And I think just, directionally, that's where we're heading.
So I know a couple of institutional entities that have TAO sat on root, and obviously I'm constantly prodding them, buy alpha. And the thing that they always say is, we don't have a wallet that can store alpha. So they may be with like BitGo or with Kraken, for their custodial ones. But for them to go out and buy alpha through the liquidity pools and then bring that alpha back to their wallet, do you know of any, like, can Crucible have a custodial institutional wallet?
Yeah, we could do that. I think there's other people who are going to build that. Obviously, everybody needs, we need kind of multiple competitors or players, to accommodate different users to be able to do that. And it's just one of the many examples of where Bittensor needs to mature.
How far away are you from that? Because that's the only thing stopping Oblong from converting a big chunk of their TAO into alpha.
Yeah, well, we could talk to them and we could probably do it pretty easily, to be honest. Like we're working on our roadmap. Kind of, I think, rightly or wrongly, we're more focused on building the Robinhood type product than, kind of more institutional type product. And so that's kind of our roadmap, but if we had something that was strategic to do, we would do it.
Sweet. We need to talk then.
Has
We have really good team. We have a really good team. So, I feel very confident that we could do that.
has anything surprised you building the wallet? Any kind of user activity that you've thought, gosh, I did not think that would be the case?
I mean, I think the main thing is we need to abstract away the complexity. And I don't think we've done that yet. Like, I think, we're kind of early on. We've only been, I'd call it more of a beta product right now. But over the next 6 months, I think or even over the next, 6 days, I think we'll do a much better job of doing that. And I think that's kind of what users would expect. I was an early investor in Robinhood. Robinhood wasn't Robinhood, what you see today, kind of at the beginning either. So it's kind of more just a trajectory thing.
I think for me, it was two things. First, that there was not yet a TAO-native wallet at all whatsoever by the time we built this. Rather surprising. That kind of did all the things that we're trying to do. So, proudly saying that we are the only TAO-native wallet doing this right now. The other one's actually more funny. I got an email literally yesterday from somebody saying they're trying to stake their SHIB tokens to my wallet, thinking that I am, the owner of some wallet with a book token. And I'm just sitting there going, all right, well, yeah, kind of close, but not quite there yet.
Give me a free phrase.
Might need a name change soon.
That's funny. What are you? Do you know already? I know you're only kind of in beta there, but are you attracting new users in for the first time, or do you think, or are they moving over from other wallets?
Yeah, we think the latter.
Mhm.
That's because that's the only people that we haven't done any broad scale marketing or anything like that. So the only people that know about it are Bittensor, kind of community, because we're primarily talking through X and Discord and whatnot.
What do you think the killer feature is? Do you think it is the allocator?
I mean, I think Robinhood like transparency is what people need. Kind of ease of doing research, and so I think all of that is kind of. I need to do my taxes. There's just a lot of stuff that is just kind of basic. And when I was talking about bringing people into Bittensor, the allocator is what I told them they should do. Like, kind of put your allocation into the top 20 subnets. You're going to probably do better than having it in root. That was kind of, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. And, short of kind of making, decisions like on specific subnets, that's a reasonable strategy to me. So I don't think we're thinking of it more as just build a first class experience of Bittensor.
Yeah, I think that ledger integration is crucial, because one thing I've said for the best part of 10 years with crypto is never, ever, 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 ever touch a browser wallet, because it's like the most unsafe form of a wallet. But now that you've got Ledger backing up, it's no different than securing your MetaMask with a Trezor or Ledger, etc. So
We're also moving into other platforms as well. It's not just going to be browser either. So the browser was sort of the start. We're moving into other platforms as well. It's not just going to be browser wallet.
Sweet. Nice. Any other questions? What questions should we have asked that we haven't asked?
What, I mean, it's super interesting, kind of what are the challenges for people coming in, and, kind of, because you're seeing those firsthand, and what can we do to address them? like when you're talking to all of these investors, so one of the things you just talked about was, oh, it would be great if, we could bring on this institutional investor, kind of, and they can hold the tower and they want. Are there any other examples of things that we could do, or you think just need to be done, that will kind of advance things?
I don't have an answer at the moment.
Well, you can follow up. You know where to find me. But that's basically the type of thing that we're asking ourselves every day is just how can we make the ecosystem stronger? And you kind of see where it's not about Crucible. We don't, we're going to talk about the products that we have in market, like the wallet, but we are much more about just making Bittensor better. Like we think if we make Bittensor better, we'll do fine. So that's kind of our attitude. And so if you kind of meet people that you think are really good, and I guess this is good for all the listeners too. If you meet people that you think are really good and need help onboarding, or they're a business that you think should, kind of be brought to fruition, we're a good person to reach out to. And we're not trying to own everything. Like we're trying to help people keep our business afloat, more or less. And kind of have a small stake in a lot of businesses. That's kind of our aspiration, built on Bittensor. So I think, and just help people, because if Bittensor does well, we do well. So that's kind of the net of it.
The ecosystem wins, we win.
Yeah, there's nothing altruistic about it. It's just a change we want to see brought into the world. We want to see this product brought into the world. That's it. Simple.
Okay, so one question that has popped up: if you were to look at all of the top 100 wallets in Bittensor right now, I would say probably 90% of them are just sat there en route doing bugger all. What do you think is required to start prodding these, let's say, the top 500 wallets to get their ass out of root and into alpha?
Well, I think we're going back to what Mark said, which is, a subnets need to break out. And those top 500 wallets are the best situated people to, kind of figure that out. So I think there's like, why do I invest in subnets is because I could make more money, not because I'm trying to help people. Right. And I've made a lot of, I've done well, I'd say, I haven't made a lot of bets, but the bets have all worked out. So I think I kind of am relatively confident that it can be done. I'm extremely confident that you can make money by investing in subnets. And, you guys are doing it every day. I don't invest as frequently as you, but I think if it's as relatively straightforward, you find a team that you like and you back them and hopefully become something. So, and I think there's good opportunities for that.
There's two questions that have popped up on the thing. So if anyone's watching, if you want a question, just put it in the feed and it pops up on here. So first one is from BatTech. Says, how can we contact the Crucible Labs team about subnet incubation?
Yeah, I think X is the kind of main channel that we're using to talk with the community right now.
Okay, cool. And yes, we give them a follow. And BatTech followed up with another question, which is, how do we reach out to you guys? I guess Twitter again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just easy.
Sweet. Right. That is all of my questions. I'm questioned out. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting session. So I'm so questioned out. He's also out of the stream there. Where's he gone? Yeah, he's off. Yeah, I mean, with the way that we think is very, very similar to the way that you guys think. What's good for Bittensor is good for us. We spend a great deal of our time, as I'm sure you do, talking to people where we are adding as much value as we can. Lots of people that have not got a subnet have got an idea, want to find out if they can use Bittensor, want to invest in something. And we try and plug people in wherever we can, because a rising tide floats all boats, and it will for every alpha holder, every subnet, every fund, and all of us. So that we're completely on board with that. And I'm excited about the wallet. I think that ledger compatibility is absolutely key, and trying to encourage people to dip a toe into alpha is a big win. And it is difficult because you do feel like you're day trading. You feel sometimes that you're going up and you're going down. It's all over the shop, and it's very difficult for people to pull the emotion out of it and take a step back and go, well, I've invested in that because I think that in 2 to 3 years' time, that's going to be absolutely fantastic. Because if the market's moved against you violently in a week, you start to have doubts.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the challenges for, kind of these early, kind of early participants is there was some price discovery, which took place in the first, 6 months of DTAO, where there was just a lot of exuberance around the subnet prices. And, yeah, so that's worked itself out now, obviously. So people are coming in now are coming in at really, kind of attractive valuations.
Go for it, Mark. Sorry.
And it's helpful that an increasing number of subnets are moving from creating a product to generating revenue, and you see them flicking their activity and their energy over from let's try and develop something to let's try and sell this. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and that takes time. Most entrepreneurial businesses, they get their seed round, pre-seed round, and then you don't hear about them 6 to 9 months, until they get their next round. And here you kind of need to build in the open, which puts a lot of pressure on business owners, and can lead to some short-termism, I think, which is a negative. And so you kind of need to resist that and keep your head down and just keep building. And that's not always what crypto investors want. They want to kind of have something number go up every day. And yeah, I don't think that's, kind of realistic. And so what you're kind of seeing is subnets go from like, in the top 40 subnets to the top 5 subnets, and then they stay at that price. And you're like, what? I want it to keep going up. But, kind of realistically, you've seen kind of something go from pre-seed to seed.
And what do you think is it's very easy to get so bullish with Bittensor. Like we're in it, we're in the thick of it, and in our minds, it's like it's a foregone conclusion that TAO's going to go to the moon, subnet's going to the moon, all that sort of stuff. But the question again that we get a lot when we're talking to these big investors is like, what's the downside? Where's the risk? What's the bullet that's heading your way, which you're so...
There are so many risks that it's ridiculous. Like you can't even start to enumerate them all.
Do you get the no risk?
Let me give you kind of risk number 1, permissionless versus permissioned. I would say that's the most interesting bet that Bittensor takes. Let's be permissionless from the beginning. So if you kind of have an analogy to autonomous, Google took the approach with autonomous driving that it's better to just go for full autonomy from the beginning. And Tesla took the approach of, we'll just, kind of have partial autonomy. Now, today, kind of Waymo looks pretty good, right? You see them all over San Francisco. The cars are, extremely safe. It seems like building in a permissionless environment was a really good approach. But, Tesla could end up with a much lower quality product in a year, a lower cost, higher quality product in a year. And so you could kind of come to the conclusion that going mass, so similarly in the Bittensor, sorry for dragging you through that metaphor, but that's how I think about it. You have people trying decentralized training projects like that in a permissioned way, where they have a small number of miners doing exactly what you're telling them to do. And you have people trying to build on Bittensor in a permissionless way. And we think building in a permissionless environment is the better way to get to the end state. Like if you don't figure out how to deal with, kind of unpermissioned actors, you'll never figure it out. Like people will always game you. And so we always tell people when they're building a subnet, the first thing you need to deal with in Bittensor is dealing with, kind of rogue attacks, people not doing what you want them to do. And focus on that. what people on other chains are saying is that we'll deal with that later. Let's just figure out how to get the application to work in a decentralized VM. And that's a valid approach as far as I'm concerned. So I take the attitude like, yeah, on balance, Bittensor is kind of what I think is the best approach to build decentralized application. I don't think people can predict what all the use cases are for decentralized AI. And so I like that Bittensor doesn't take a strong opinion there, but more creates, incubator for other people to, kind of explore their ideas. But I could see a really smart team on some other using, kind of working on another project that will ultimately come out with the best decentralized AI for sure.
So, okay, you'll probably have a better take on this, Alla, because Bittensor is sort of on two flywheels at the moment. Well, sorry, someone's hairdryer is on. Don't know whose mic is. Anyway, I'll continue. So there's two flywheels with Bittensor as I see things from sort of like a top-down approach. If TAO starts mooning and it goes, let's say it's all of a sudden $3,000 TAO, it's a really positive flywheel because all the miners that have fixed OPEX, they have to sell, or they then will sell less TAO to cover their OPEX, which means there's less sell side, which means the price goes up. And there's other knock-on effects like that. But also, it's the same on the downward. So if TAO price goes down and it's like $200, now for that same miner or validator or business to cover their fixed real-world OPEX, they've got to sell more TAO units to cover that. So in theory, at some point, there is a low price where Bittensor just doesn't work, or we have a mass exodus of talent and people like workers. Where do you think that price is, Alla? Right, from how you know.
It's a very good question. And I think sort of the nuance behind it is subnet specific. And that's actually, I think, where the beauty of DTAO comes in, right? Because some subnets require, like, it goes on to actually more specific, it goes into margins, right? And miners, the margins in the first place. And really, if the miners have sort of high margins, then this problem is sort of minimized as much as possible. You won't need, even if the TAO price goes down significantly, the margins are well enough to cover most costs. And if the TAO price goes up, you sell even less. So I think really the key there really is on everybody. But if you want to focus on one specific entity, I think the one that everyone's talking about is the miners. And I think if their margins are as high as possible, then you'll mitigate this problem as much as you can. And that's exactly why sort of Dave and I have been talking to every subnet we talked to, and it's always been, please reduce your margins as much as possible, because of course, for some of the richer subnets, they can't help it, right? That's just how it is. But for a lot of these product subnets out there, they don't need all that power for a lot of the time, unless, unless they had coded their way in coded their incentive mechanism in a way that puts less onus on the miners. In a way, you're also putting less onus on the price, because you'd make it a little bit more resilient to price drops like this.
So what about like miner intensive subnets? So compute subnets, they have so those miners have the thinnest of margins. So like
let me know, like the subnets will be there'll be less demand, and then there'll be less supply. Kind of the same way that Bitcoin miners come in and out of the market.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two.
I think what we, kind of what you're highlighting is, yes, if everybody thinks Bittensor is going to be a good mechanism, then it becomes a better mechanism. And if everybody thinks the product is shit, then right? Yeah. Okay. Yes. I think all of that is very intuitive.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what dress you put on a turd; it's still a shit turd.
Well, I mean, if we don't achieve any great if we don't have any great subnets on Bittensor will not succeed. And if there are good subnets on Bittensor, and we've created the market mechanism, but we need people. So what you guys think a lot about investors coming in, we don't really spend. We are building tools for investors because we think that's kind of necessary, and we do believe, kind of transparent market is kind of essential to kind of a well-functioning market. But we spend a lot more time talking to developers because that's the community that we need to really bring on, whether it's kind of going to open source AI conferences, broadly, or other people in the crypto AI ecosystem. And that's the metric that I use to get excited, to be honest. Like, do I feel like the quality of the teams coming in is 10 times better than it was 2 years ago? Well, of course I do.
And I think the other thing here is, to David's point, I think developers are much more important right now than anything else. I think worrying about price, this early stage of Bittensor is kind of like buying your socks before your wedding suit. Doesn't really make sense yet, give it some time. And I think it's sort of the innovation really lies there specifically, not anything else.
And that's not so appealing to the average crypto investor who's kind of thinking more daily in terms of how they're, but I think it's more realistic. It's been development in crypto has not been that speedy. Like, if you just kind of step back, it's like, okay, how many Ethereum applications do you use every day? And that's been around for like a decade. So it takes time to build these applications, but I think of Bitcoin as just getting going. I think stable coins is getting going. Like, I think these things are 1% of what they're going to be, like stable coin usage for sure. And that everybody's going to have crypto rails built in. Like, every company like Google is going to use crypto rails to move their own money around. You see, the infrastructure gets built out, and then you have the potential to do a lot more. And that's a lot like, we saw the kind of browser came out in 1994, but people had narrowband. And then, kind of in, let's say 1997, the peak of the kind of, or the beginning of the kind of bull market for the internet, there was like 75 million people on the internet. Like, it looked like nothing because nobody had access. So I think that's kind of where we are overall in crypto.
Yeah.
It just takes time for everybody to get, kind of, and I think AI agents are really like, I don't want to think about addresses, and it's so anxiety provoking, everything that you deal with on crypto, right? It's like a kind of a hard product, but it's going to be so easy for agents to use this infrastructure. So I also think it's just like, yeah, it's time of its coming.
I was thinking that like I don't watch trash TV, but you see things like the Kardashians and all these like fly on the wall type documentaries where they're following someone who's like a Z-list celebrity and whatever. And I was thinking that's actually a very powerful tool if you're to get some form of influencer who is about to or wanting to set up, let's say, a tech business, and they go through all the thought processes every single day, and then they set up the business, but the business they're setting up is a subnet. And that this subnet is a bit like a fine where it uses hiatus, uses video compression, it uses shoots and gradients and all these different things to then launch a product, but then uses some of the agents that some of the subnets are creating, where but everything to be on chain, like have the most transparent company on the planet, where the Stripe or QuickBooks or the online accounting is all like a Grafana dashboard of some sort, so people can see live revenue coming in. Where does the revenue go out to? I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's why I think a lot of people who are kind of early to crypto are kind of still so passionate about it. Is, yes, we can have countries coordinate activity, we can have companies coordinate activity, and wouldn't it be great to have some other mechanism for coordinating human activity? It just kind of seems obvious.
I mean, I will watch the hell out of Keeping Up with the Jacobs, this TV show where we just watch Jacob do random things in Peru. Very down for that.
Yes, and then the Telegram escapade. That'd be amazing. Right. I'm aware, David, you got a tight schedule. I think you got another meeting to head off to. Thank you so much for your time, Alla and David. It is an honor. If anyone wants to follow them on Twitter, follow them on Crucible Labs or at Crucible Labs. Are there any last passing comments that you'd like to make, folks?
Just thanks for having us.
Yep, had a great time.
Amazing. Mark, the quiet man in the corner.
Well, I've been let down by the satellites today, but yeah, it's been a great conversation. Looking forward to getting you back on when some more of these subnet rumors have been unearthed.
Looking forward to it. You'll see the people running it. It's gonna be great.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Cheerio, folks.